Marshall Reynolds stood in his cluttered garage workshop in the small town of Ashford, Kent, the familiar cold steel of a wrench resting heavy in his calloused hands. At 34, he had built Reynolds Construction from the ground up, starting with a battered old Ford Ranger and a toolbox left to him by his late father. Now, his company employed 40 people and had just secured the contract to refurbish Ashford's historic town hall, a job that promised both prestige and challenges. The sound of a sleek silver Honda pulling into the driveway made Marshall's lips curl into a weary but genuine smile. After 8 years of marriage, that familiar purr still meant home. He remembered meeting Emma Clark at a coffee shop near her accounting firm, where she was always buried in spreadsheets during her lunch breaks. She was sharp with numbers, methodical in everything she did, and had a laugh that could brighten even the dreariest English drizzle. "Marshall, you in there? Making something explode again?" Emma's teasing voice floated from the kitchen doorway. "Just fixing Mrs. Beale's hedge trimmer," he called back, wiping his hands on a rag that had seen better days. "She dropped it off this morning, said it's been acting up." Emma appeared in the garage doorway, still wearing her tailored navy suit from Turner & Brooks, the mid-sized firm she'd been with for 3 years. Her blonde hair was pulled into a neat bun, but the tension around her soft green eyes betrayed a long day. "Long one?" Marshall asked, noting the faint crease between her brows. "The usual," she sighed. "Mr. Turner's been pushing the team hard. Big audit coming up for the Northbridge Group." She shrugged, but Marshall caught an unfamiliar hesitation in her voice, like a crack beneath the surface. Marshall had met Simon Turner twice. Once at the firm's Christmas party 2 years ago, and again at a charity event last summer. The man had the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, and the ruthless ambition of someone who'd happily step on his own mother to get ahead. He wore expensive suits, drove a flashy Audi, and had the air of a man used to being obeyed. "How's the town hall project coming along?" Emma asked, shifting the subject as she often did when work weighed on her. "The foundation passed inspection this morning. We'll start interior demolition next week," Marshall replied, testing the hedge trimmer's pull cord. It roared to life on the first try. "Mrs. Beale's going to be pleased." That evening, they sat on their weathered garden bench, sipping a bottle of red wine and watching the sun sink behind Ashford's quaint rooftops. It was their ritual, a few stolen moments before the day officially ended. Emma rested her head on Marshall's shoulder. "Remember when we first looked at this house? You said the kitchen was too cramped and the garden needed some serious work." Marshall chuckled. "Still working on the kitchen, but the garden's shaping up. Rome wasn't built in a day." Emma smiled, the faintest hint of warmth in her tired eyes. They laughed, and for a moment, everything felt perfectly normal. Little did Marshall know, their carefully built world was about to crack wide open. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, typical for Ashford. By 6:30 a.m., Marshall was already at the town hall, poring over blueprints with his foreman, Andy Collins. The damp air carried the faint scent of fresh timber and old stone. "The city inspector's adamant we preserve the original woodwork," Andy said, pointing to a section of the plans. "But some of these support beams look dodgy." Marshall studied the faded markings. "We'll reinforce them properly. This building's got to stand for another 100 years. His phone buzzed. A message from Emma. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. Love you." That was the third text like that in 2 weeks. Marshall frowned but pushed the worry aside. Audit season was brutal, especially under Simon Turner's iron fist by 5 p.m. The crew had successfully removed 3 sections of delicate paneling without a scratch. Marshall was reviewing the day's progress when his phone rang. "Marshall?" Emma's voice sounded strained. "I'm going to be even later. Simon wants me to review some files tonight." "How late are we talking?" "Maybe 10, 11. "Sorry, love. I know we plan to look at kitchen cabinets." Marshall forced a smile he hoped she couldn't hear. "The cabinets can wait. Drive safe." That night, Marshall stayed in the workshop, building a simple bookshelf for their bedroom. The rhythmic sanding soothed his mind, but a nagging unease lingered. Emma seemed stretched thin, not just from work but something heavier. At 11:15, Headlights swept across the garage window. Marshall put down his sandpaper and headed to the kitchen, just as Emma entered the house. The first thing he noticed was her limp. "Emma, what happened to your leg?" he asked, concern tightening his voice. "Nothing serious," she said, forcing a smile but favoring her left side. "Clumsy me. I tripped on the cracked pavement outside the office." "Let me see." She brushed past him toward the stairs. "Just a bruise. I'm going to take a hot bath and then bed." Marshall watched her grip the banister more tightly than necessary as she climbed. The explanation made sense. Ashford's pavements were notoriously uneven near the old quarter. Still, something about her tone reminded him of a contractor trying to cover up a structural flaw. Careful, measured, and hiding too much. Later, when Emma emerged from the bathroom in soft cotton pajamas, moving with less stiffness, Marshall asked, "Feeling better?" "Much better," she replied, pressing a kiss to his cheek. "Thanks for not fussing." They went to bed, but Marshall lay awake, listening to her shallow breathing. She fell asleep too quickly for someone who wasn't exhausted. When he was sure she was deep in slumber, he slipped downstairs. Her handbag sat on the kitchen counter where she'd left it. Marshall hesitated, never the snooping type, but worry gnawed at him. He checked her phone. Work texts, a few messages from her sister, mundane grocery reminders. No strange numbers or deleted messages. Then he spotted a call at 6:47 p.m. to an unknown number, almost 2 hours after she'd told him she was still at work. Marshall memorized the number but didn't call back. In construction, he'd learned that when something looked wrong, it usually was. The trick was figuring out how bad before the whole thing came crashing down. Wednesday arrived under a heavy blanket of rain, turning the town hall renovation into a carefully choreographed dance around tarps and puddles. Marshall spent the morning coordinating with the electrical subcontractor, but his mind kept drifting back to that mysterious phone call from Emma's phone. By lunchtime, he'd made a decision. He dialed the unfamiliar number. "Turner and Brooks, this is Simon," came the smooth, clipped voice on the other end. Marshall hung up immediately, heart pounding. Why had Emma called Simon Turner from a number not saved in her contacts? And why, nearly 2 hours after she said she'd still be working? The afternoon dragged on. Marshall found himself glancing at his phone every few minutes, hoping for a text from Emma that might explain the growing knot in his stomach. Instead, his phone buzzed with a call from Mrs. Beale, the kindly widow next door. "I'm afraid the hedge trimmer's still making that awful grinding noise," she said as Marshall grabbed his toolbox. "You're a gem for helping out, Marshall. Emma's lucky to have a husband who can fix things. 20 minutes later, Marshall had extracted a crushed twig and a rogue stone from the machine. Mrs. Beale insisted on sending him home with a slice of her famous apple pie. "How's Emma doing?" she asked, adjusting her spectacles. "Saw her come home last night looking a bit roughed up." Marshall froze. "Rough, you say? Well, not exactly rough, but she was limping and her blouse looked rumpled, like she'd been in a scuffle or something." Mrs. Beale shook her head. "Probably just a long day at the office. Those corporate types work their people too hard, you know." Marshall thanked her and walked back home slowly, her words echoing in his mind. By the time he reached the front door, a cold certainty settled in his gut. Emma sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open, fingers flying over spreadsheets. She glanced up as he entered. "Mrs. Beale okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just a penny stuck in her hedge trimmer," he replied, sitting across from her. "Emma, I need to ask you something. Please be straight with me. What really happened to your leg yesterday?" For a tense moment, she said nothing. Then she closed the laptop and looked him in the eye. "I told you. I tripped on the pavement." Mrs. Beale said you looked like you'd been in some kind of struggle. "Show me the bruise." Emma's face went pale. Mrs. Beale needs new glasses. Slowly, she rolled up her sleeve. The bruise on her left forearm was large and dark, roughly the size of a man's hand. But this wasn't just a bruise from falling. Marshall had seen enough accidents on sites to recognize the clear pattern of fingers pressed too hard into soft skin. "Who did this to you?" Emma rolled her sleeve back down. "Nobody. I fell. Someone grabbed you hard enough to leave fingerprints." "I'm asking again, what happened?" Tears welled in her eyes. "It's not what you think." Then tell me. Her composure broke. Simon. He was angry about some errors in the Northbridge files. He thought I made a mistake that could cost the firm the contract. He was shouting, and I tried to explain. He grabbed my arm hard, but only briefly. Then he realized and apologized that he put his hands on you. It wasn't like that. He was just frustrated. He put his hands on you. Marshall repeated, voice steady but cold. And you covered for him. Because you didn't want trouble at work. Emma nodded, tears spilling over. HR, investigations, lawyers. I didn't want that. A bruise that'll heal in a week isn't worth all that. Marshall stood abruptly, anger simmering beneath the surface. I'm calling him Dedano. Please don't make this worse. But before she could stop him, Marshall was dialing. Marshall Reynolds. Marshall. Everything all right? I want to know what happened in your office yesterday. There was a long pause. I'm not sure what you mean. My wife came home with bruises that match fingerprints. Care to explain? Another pause, longer this time, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. What happened? The friendly tone vanished. Reynolds, workplace matters are between employees and management. I don't discuss internal issues with spouses. Your wife made an error that cost us a major contract. I may have been emphatic in expressing my disappointment. Marshall's jaw clenched. Emphatic? These things happen under pressure. I'm sure Emma told you it was nothing serious, so you did grab her. I touched her arm briefly to get her attention. So what? I hit her? The line went silent. Did you just say you hit my wife? You heard me. What are you going to do about it? Marshall hung up without another word. Behind him, Emma was watching, eyes wide with fear. What did he say? She whispered. Brilliant, Marshall said quietly. Trusting a man who just admitted to hitting you and dared me to do something about it. Pack a bag, Marshall said. You're staying at your sister's tonight. Emma looked at him, trembling. What did he say? Just pack. While Emma gathered her things, Marshall opened the old metal toolbox where he kept important documents. Beneath the manuals and warranty papers was a small black address book, untouched for 5 years. Some numbers you never forget, some favors you save for when they truly matter. He picked up his phone and scrolled to a contact he'd hoped never to use. Terry, it's Marshall. I need a favor. At 6 o'clock sharp the next morning, Terry Morgan arrived at Marshall's modest home in Ashford, looking every bit the same as he had 5 years ago when Marshall last saw him. Of medium height with a sturdy frame, Terry's pale blue eyes seemed to take in every detail, cataloging information with unnerving precision. He wore a simple gray suit and carried a leather portfolio that could have belonged to any insurance adjuster or tax consultant. Coffee, Marshall offered, leading Terry into the kitchen. Black, thanks, Terry replied, settling at the worn kitchen table and flipping open his portfolio. You said Simon Turner, the accountant? That's right. Terry clicked his pen and pulled out a yellow legal pad. Tell me everything. Marshall recounted the recent events. Emma's bruises, Turner's admission of physical contact, and the chilling dare he'd issued. Terry listened intently, jotting notes with swift, deliberate strokes. You recorded the call? No, but Emma was there. Witnesses are good. Terry nodded. What outcome do you want? Marshall thought for a moment. An apology felt laughable. Going to the police risked Emma's career and privacy. A lawsuit would drag on for years and cost a fortune. I want him to understand actions have consequences. Marshall said firmly. I want him to regret ever putting his hands on my wife. Regret can be arranged in varying degrees, Terry said with a faint smile. How much regret are we talking about? Marshall's jaw tightened. Enough that he never touches anyone else's wife again. Terry made a final note. I'll need 48 hours to build a full profile. Background, finances, relationships, weaknesses. Then we discuss options. What kind of options? The kind that solve problems permanently. Terry closed his portfolio. One thing, once we start, there's no backing out. No second thoughts. Marshall met Terry's gaze. I'm sure. After Terry left, Marshall called in sick to his crew and spent the day researching Turner online. On the surface, Simon was the picture of success. Glossy professional photos, company bio, social media posts flaunting expensive holidays and charity galas. Yet beneath the polished veneer, Marshall uncovered financial records showing Turner was barely treading water. Leasing his Audi, juggling hefty mortgages, and skating dangerously close to insolvency. That evening, Emma called from her sister's flat. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine. How's Fran treating you?" "She's making me binge romantic comedies and eat ice cream. Says it's therapy." Emma's voice faltered. "Marshall, I know you're angry, but please don't do anything that might make this worse. I'm not going to do anything stupid. I promise." Marshall looked out the kitchen window at Mrs. Beale's house. Warm light spilling from every window. Normal people, normal lives, normal problems. Broken hedge trimmers and creaky fences. "I promise," he said quietly. But what he was planning was anything but ordinary. On a damp Friday afternoon, Marshall met Terry at a cozy little cafe tucked away on Ashford's High Street. Terry sat in a corner booth, nursing a black coffee and flipping casually through a newspaper, perfectly blending in with the morning rush of office workers grabbing their caffeine fixed as Marshall slid into the seat opposite. Terry pushed a manila folder across the scratched wooden table. "Simon Turner is quite an interesting man," Terry said without any preamble. Inside the folder were photographs, financial documents, and detailed notes that looked like the meticulous work of a detective. Marshall flipped through the pages, absorbing the information. "How did you get all this?" he asked, impressed. "Mostly public records, property deeds, business licenses, court filings. People leave an awful lot of breadcrumbs if you know where to look," Terry said with a grin. Terry pointed to a highlighted section. Turner's 3 main weaknesses: money, image, and control. Marshall nodded. "He's been living beyond his means for a while, hasn't he?" "Exactly. Leasing that flashy Audi, mortgaging his townhouse in the center of town, juggling debts like plates on a circus stage. His firm's revenues look healthy on paper, but profits are razor-thin. He's been robbing Peter to pay Paul for nearly 2 years. And the Northbridge audit? Turner's banking on that contract to keep his business afloat." Terry flipped to another set of documents. Image-wise, Turner sits on 2 charity boards and belongs to an exclusive local business club. His reputation is everything. One scandal and his world comes crashing down. Marshall studied the surveillance photos. Turner leaving his townhouse, dining at expensive restaurants, and attending high-profile charity balls. A man putting on a show of success while scrambling to keep the facade intact. "What's your plan?" Terry asked. Marshall smiled grimly. "When a man's house of cards is already wobbling, it doesn't take much to topple it." Terry nodded approvingly. "Now you're thinking like a problem solver." They spent the next hour mapping out Turner's schedule, habits, and vulnerabilities. By the time Marshall left the cafe, they had the blueprint for a plan designed to teach Simon Turner a lesson he'd never forget. That evening, Marshall called Emma to check in. "When are you coming home?" she asked, her voice thin. "Soon. Just need to finish a few things first." "Marshall, you're scaring me. This isn't like you." She was right. The man she'd married was straightforward, honest, and hardworking. But this was different. This was a man pushed to the edge. "I love you," Marshall said instead of trying to explain. "Everything's going to be fine. I promise." Saturday morning, Marshall drove to a small storage unit on the outskirts of Ashford. The unit was rented under a business name that existed only on paper, arranged years ago when he'd faced a different kind of trouble. Inside were items he hoped never to use: untraceable phones, laptops rigged for anonymous browsing, and bundles of cash and small bills. His insurance policy against the unexpected, he activated one of the phones and dialed the number Terry had given him. "Clearview Investigations?" A professional female voice answered. "I'd like to schedule a consultation regarding a domestic abuse case." Marshall read from the carefully prepared script. "Certainly. Are you the victim or a concerned party?" "Concerned party. My sister-in-law is being abused by her employer." The woman took down fabricated details and scheduled a consultation for the following Tuesday. Over the afternoon, Marshall made 4 more calls to various agencies, each reporting concerns about Simon Turner: animal welfare, tax irregularities, professional misconduct, and licensing issues. Individually, the reports were minor. Together, they formed a storm of scrutiny that would have Turner feeling like his world was collapsing. But the real masterpiece was yet to come.